Hello, and welcome to today's webcast, Accelerating Digital Innovation, Moving at the Speed of Constituents. My name is Terry Takai, and I'm a Vice President with the Center for Digital Government. I'm so excited to be with you today to serve as the host for today's webcast on a topic that is on everyone's mind as we continue to move, hopefully, out of this pandemic and into what our next steps will be. So thanks for joining us. We're going to have a great session over the next 60 minutes. Now, we have a few housekeeping notes for you on the screen, so just take a look at them very quickly. And during today's webcast, you'll be able to connect with your peers via LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook. For those of you on Twitter, please use hashtag GovTechLive to share key takeaways, quotes, and learnings from today's webcast. Now, you can also use the chat function to share thoughts with others that are in the audience. I will be keeping an eye out for any questions that you have for the speakers, and we'll do a little question and answer towards the end of the webcast. All right, well, let's get started. I'm so excited to introduce our set of speakers today. First, I have Jay Song, who is the Chief Information Officer for the California Department of Forestry and Fire Protection. Next is Adam Dondro. He's the Chief Information Officer for the California Health and Human Services Agency. Ajay Gupta, who is the Chief Information Officer and Chief Digital Transformation Officer for the California DMV. And Peter Zalkind, who is a Principal Advisor for Health and Government Solutions for KPMG. All right, well, let's get going. Now, we all know that this has been an exciting time to be in state and local government. We're seeing new appreciation for how technology is changing the way that government services are delivered. But how can state and local governments embrace and accelerate digital innovation to reimagine their traditional IT operating models? And how through that can they deliver superior value to constituents? As state and local governments strive to offer services and experiences sufficiently as possible and move at the speed of their constituents, they face their existing legacy technologies and the challenges of implementing new technologies. This is going to be a great conversation. We're not only going to talk about the challenges of the technologies, but we're also going to talk about some of the challenges that we all face with changing culture and getting people comfortable with changing some of the things that we've been doing this way for a very long time. All right, well, let's jump in. So Jay, I'm going to start with you. I mean, clearly, forestry and fire protection are so critical to California residents today. But what does that mean in terms of your digital innovation strategy? What are you doing to really manage that digital innovation?
Oh, thank you, Terry. Well, digital transformation for CAL FIRE, meaning we're going to transform the way we do business from yesterday to today and tomorrow. Our technology is not just for the sake of doing technology. Technology needed to be translated into business capability. Our firefighter does not need to have traditionally carry a laptop or back to the office to use technology to get the vital information. In today's world, that means the information must be delivered at their fingertips, at anywhere they are, which is challenging because we did not build a statewide network infrastructure to deliver service in every corner of California. And the wildfire is going anywhere they want, and we have no choice of which location, so which give us huge challenge. It doesn't matter how brilliant technology solution you build, if you cannot deliver to the firefighter, to the forefront of the firefighting, then it will not be useful. So digital transformation, digital innovation is a constant challenge. And also it's a driver to enable us to provide more and more technology-enabled business solution to speed up the fire camp process, to deliver critical AI-enabled fire behavior, fire pattern prediction technology in the hand of a firefighter, saving life, not just theirs, and also our public. So we are excited. We have the opportunity to drive innovation every day and to see the result in our operation, to see the improvement our firefighting operation. So it's very rewarding, and also it's very challenging operation. Thank you.
So with that, Jay, how are you managing your legacy technologies as you're moving towards innovation? Are you finding that you have to replace things? Are you able to work with your legacy technologies? What are some of the challenges that come from that?
Yes, we have over 100 years of company business agency, so we have a lot of legacy operation. The challenge, for example, is the CAL FIRE. We have over 3,000 contract county, city, and vendor to provide firefighting equipment to support us, to manage onboarding, offboarding, and to keep the information up to date. It's a huge challenge because in your firefighting situation, you do not have a luxury to call everyone, and you just need the information to show who will be available. Those are primarily a paper form-based process. So the CAL FIRE, we are working very hard to digitize the process, put that information in a few seconds of a search time in the hand of our firefighter. They can asking for resource, asking for even helicopter to nearby to come over to provide support. So to manage our contract county and the city is a huge challenge, but that is one of the most important digital service we provided and continue to improve.
Fantastic. Well, thanks, Jay. Well, we'll come back to you with some of our questions in a while. But Ajay, I cannot imagine another organization that certainly gets constituent scrutiny like Department of Motor Vehicles. And clearly you were delivering really critical citizen services during the pandemic, and that really required you to think about things very differently. So maybe you could talk about some of the things that you've done, and then, how are you seeing this continue in the future?
Yeah, thanks, Sherry, for that question. It's, us being the most populated state, and in terms of the number of DMVs throughout the state, we are the largest brick and click organized state entity in the state. So yes, it comes with a lot of scrutiny. We are the face of the state. And we collect over $12 billion in revenue annually for the state. So there is the fiscal part of it as well. That's really important for the state, the governor's office, etc. So when COVID hit us, we somewhat got lucky timing wise, and we used that crisis as an opportunity to really accelerate my own digital transformation and innovation agenda. So while it was not feasible to modify our 40-year-old technology that was still, I want to say, solid, working well, but is not nimble, we were already looking at technologies that would work around the limitations of legacy to serve our customers. So we ended up using a lot of, I want to say cutting edge for public sector, but not necessarily for rest of the industry. So we combined all the good ideas from other industries. So we used RPA, machine learning, AI, web accelerators, remote identity proofing, data virtualization, virtual assistants, cloud native technologies, federated identity, all the fun stuff, for technologists to really serve our customers in the need where field offices had to be closed, very little appointments, if any. Then if you all recall, there were some riots that also were coincided with some of the COVID shutdowns as well. We issued millions of transactions during that time. We set up a virtual field office within a matter of 2 weeks. So now we had an assisted way of serving our customers. So since then, we have expanded the use of these design patterns that we created for other services and channels. We have expanded our contact center channels, where it's augmented with our web channel or combining and working together. We have created this notion of contactless real ID issuance that we're working with DHS to really come to fruition. Mobile technicians, so the DMV would go to you, to your nearest AAA office. Remote proctoring, so you don't need to go to DMV for knowledge tests, etc. Remote check-ins, just like airlines. So we know you don't need to be in the line. You know where you're in the line before you show up in the field office to avoid crowds. Workforce scheduling optimization, so we know when the most traffic is going to hit the field offices, so we can manage it appropriately in terms of staff availability, crowd management, etc. So those are some of the things that we have really learned and carried over and will continue to move forward doing our digital transformation for the DMV, for the state.
Ajay, that is an amazing list of accomplishments. And I know one of the things that everyone complains about always is having to stand in line and not being able to really look at those services. Can you give us a hint into the future? What are some of the things that aren't implemented yet, but you're thinking about, in terms of continuing to improve the service?
Sure, Terry. So our focus is creating this nimble delivery model at the DMV where we equip all our service channels, right? The voice, the online, the paper, the in-person, with state-of-the-art technology to serve our customers wherever they are, right? This includes adding additional online services, additional assisted channels, right? So we got our chatbots running, but we also have these live agents, live chat agents available to serve our customers and there is real-time language translation happening as well, right? In 13 different languages at this point in time. Creating these augmented voice to digital journey where you'll start your journey maybe on the phone, finish it on the web or on your mobile device, when you need e-signatures, etc. Creating, like I was talking about, mobile technicians, where we have created this ecosystem with a very low profile, right? Everything that DMV would do fit in a really small suitcase, and mostly on a single tablet where you can take your biometric signatures, etc., and print out your registration card and things like that, and be able to serve our customers, but also serve our local assistance centers during disasters, right? So Jay was talking about CAL FIRE, having that particular role to play. DMV also has that role to play, believe it or not. We support our local assistance centers during disaster. And then with some of the other upcoming things are mobile driver license, right? So you don't necessarily have the need to carry a physical driver license, create something that's, that's there available on your phone, which most of the people already have, creating that option for our customers. Creating this whole virtual ecosystem where customers can serve themselves and also get additional services that are available in other parts of the state as well. So that's some of the pieces of the journey that we are taking on right now.
Wow, that is really, really exciting. Well, let me turn to you, Adam. Next to the Department of Motor Vehicles, or maybe even surpassing some of the challenges that they have, clearly Health and Human Services is really trying to reach so many citizens, and that was really exacerbated during the pandemic. So what are some of the areas that you're looking at from a digital innovation standpoint to really get out and make sure that you have those consistent services for everyone that needs them?
Yeah, I appreciate it, Terry. And we deal with a lot of the same issues that Ajay just talked about. The diversity of the population that we need to serve in California. We have over 20 million people at any given point in time on our different health and human services programs, and there's dozens of them, some of them very small and targeted, some of them very broad. And what makes it so complicated is that with that in-need population, we have to deal with digital literacy, device accessibility, trust of government is a huge thing right now, right? And how do we deal with those issues that are going on? So really, when we look at digital transformation and the things we're trying to focus on, there's two things. One is flexibility. We need to be flexibility in terms of when, where, and how. Mobile devices, desktops. Ajay talked about language accessibility, just plain and simple ADA accessibility. All of those things have to be incorporated into the way that we're going to provide those services. And to do that, Digital transformation is a key portion of that, to be able to do that in a flexible, agile manner. The other piece is that we have some of the most complex applications that exist in government. And I know that that is a tall order to make that claim, but the way that health and human service applications, there is check after check after check, the amount of detail that we ask, and for every program, it's different, right? If you're looking for CalFresh, or I guess this isn't just California folks, if you're looking at SNAP programs, you need to have information about your household, everyone who's living in your household. But when you're applying for another program, we're going to ask about your family, right? And so that's going to exclude Uncle John, who lives with you, that you had to include in the last one, right? And so there's all this detail and nuance that we have to walk people through. And so for us, when we talk about digital transformation, first and foremost is the user experience and user experience design. We need to get out in person with folks, which historically has not been government's strong point, especially at the state level, to talk about how do you use this? What does your interaction look like? And so that's really where a lot of our focus is. And so when we're looking at digital transformation, we're not nearly as focused on our footprint, our technology footprint at the state level, as we are about that user experience, both for the public and for the workers who have to administer these programs. It's different in every state. In California, we're partnering closely with our locals in the counties who administer most of these programs on behalf of the state. And so looking at how has our technology enabled you to most effectively use your time to serve constituents, right? Can we stop so workers don't have to spend half of their day doing data input and can instead spend those 4 hours face-to-face with an individual who really needs support, right? And so those are the things that we're really focused on. And I think we'll have a chance to get into this later, but a key component of that is around the data. We ask folks over and over and over again for the same information that we already have collected, right? Whether it's working with the DMV to provide everything you needed to get your license or ID, or whether it's one of the other dozens of programs that you may interact with on the health and human services side. How many times have you provided your address? How many times have you told us about the job change that you had? How many times have you told us that you had a new child, right? And what can we do on our end to simplify that process for the user so that information that they've provided to the state of California, right? We're not 12 different agencies. We're not 50 different departments. We're not 100 different programs. We're the state of California from the constituent's perspective. How do we start to act like that and utilize their information in a secure and private manner, but that serves them better?
Well, thank you, Adam. That really is so important. Let me just ask a follow-on question on modernization. You know, that sort of is a bit of a buzzword out there right now. So are you finding that you can work with your legacy technologies? Are you having to replace some of them in order to be kind of, as you say, user-centric or citizen-centric? You know, because that's a big challenge facing all of your legacy technologies as well.
It is, and we've got a lot of them. I'd say what I tell people is it really depends. A lot of times in my role as the agency chief information officer, we get business cases presented to us. Why do you need to do this? And a lot of times that business case is, it's old, it's clunky, it's unreliable. And that's not the worst reason in the world to fix a system or replace a system or modernize a system, but it's not really the purpose behind modernization. If it's just old and clunky, let's deal with that. But if you really want to modernize, what for, right? It goes back to the flexibility. Are you not able to meet the consumer where they're at? Because anytime you need to make a change, it's a 6-month process, right? That's a problem that needs addressing. And so when we start to talk about meeting user needs and the modernization, that's where I try to start those conversations is, what is it about your legacy system that prevents you from serving the constituent? Sometimes you can put something user-centered in front of your legacy system and it works just fine to meet those needs. And you can do that a whole lot quicker. And the pandemic really brought that forward. When we look at the Department of Public Health and the things that they had to do, we literally had 300% increases in usage of some of our programs, right? When we're talking about tracking testing that's going on across the state, right? Thousands % increase from what we used to see. A system that used to get checked monthly because it wasn't a big deal suddenly wanted hourly updates on what was happening, right? Where we used to have thousands of inputs over the course of a month, we now had thousands inputs over the course of minutes, right? We're not over the course of a week going to replace a modern system, a legacy system with something more modern. So what do you put in front of that to facilitate these things? How can we be transparent with the data in a system that used to keep data locked away? And so we really go back to what is the challenge that you're trying to fix? And sometimes that does require modernization because the legacy system can't keep up. A lot of times it is possible to continue on with those wrappers with a front end in its place, either short-term or long-term. And so I really try to have people step back and say, what is it you're trying to solve? What's the problem you're solving for? And let's talk about the mechanism to do that, and whether true legacy modernization is needed immediately or over the long term. But I do think for a lot of those legacy systems in the long-term picture, modernization will be incredibly helpful for that flexibility perspective, the ability to ramp up and ramp down based on need, the ability to adjust those user interfaces on a quick basis. Those are the things that I think really drive us. And I think, you know, for our operations, a big piece of that is breaking out of our silos. It used to be literally individual programs, even within a department like the Department of Public Health, hundreds of programs that they operate across the state, relatively siloed in the way that they're dealt with. The data is stored separately, applications are separate, interfaces are separate. And what we're trying to do now is step up and come out of that. We last year created the Center for Digital Insights and for Data Insights and Innovation within our agency. That's for the first time at an agency level, bringing data analysts and expertise to look across our departments, right? We're building a new early childhood integrated data system for the state where we can start to say, not one at a time, how does enrollment in this program impact the future well-being of these individuals? How do we look at the individuals, the children themselves, and truly analyze where we're making an impact, which programs make a difference, which combination of programs make a difference? Stepping up and coming out and building systems, integrating systems to do that, that's where we really see the big change in our future.
Oh, that's amazing. Adam, I think that we're going to talk a little more later about data and the impact of that kind of collaboration. Well, Peter, let me turn to you. I mean, you work with any number of California agencies. And so, you know, kind of overall, what do you see them doing to move their digital innovation agendas forward?
Sorry. Yes, I actually work with all three of my co-presenters here in some way. I mean, this all started with remote work, right? We'll go back a little bit here for a second. So when the pandemic hit, it was all about getting people out of buildings, getting them home and enabling that capability. And so it started as, how do we enable remote work? I think then the focus really turned to revenue generating workloads. So a lot of, you heard Ajay talk about that. A lot of the focus was on keeping revenue generated in the state, making sure that if people are all remote and everyone's working from home, that they could still generate the revenue needed to keep government running. Now, what you're hearing from Adam was this whole concept of the constituent experience. That's becoming more and more important. I think the expectations of the constituents has changed. As soon as they stopped going into buildings and handing paper over a desk, they started to expect, as what people call the Amazon experience, the online shopping experience, as they're working with government. And I think Ajay talked a lot about that as well. And I've seen a lot of innovation across California, and the departments are trying to enable that experience. But that has its complexities and its challenges. And Adam spoke about a lot of those. These siloed systems, working with mainframes, trying to combine all of these data sets into that experience is a challenge that each of these departments is trying to take on. I think what this is really driving, though, behind the scenes, if we stop talking about technology, is how do you change your organization to support these experiences? And I think that's becoming a much larger topic around the state. A simple example, and I think all three of my co-presenters probably have this challenge, is how do you rework your call center? You're now combining workloads, and maybe you're giving out one phone number, or you're giving one web experience, and you're combining all of this workload, and someone is still going to call in if they need help. So who are they going to speak to? Historically, they got probably a specialist from a department or on a application. Now they're calling in, and they might be asking a question that traverses multiple applications or data sets. So how do you organize to support that? How do you implement new technology in the call center? You're dealing with multiple languages. Maybe your call center supported 2 languages, and now you've put out a website that has 13 languages. You might get calls in 13 languages. How do you support that? So there's a lot of discussion around the state around reorganizing and reskilling just to support the call centers, just to support the new way of operating in this digitally transformed new now that we have.
Peter, those are really, really good points. And I think that there, are not any number of individuals that are going to get impacted by the technology in ways that they maybe hadn't thought about. So any examples from a change management and kind of an organization change management perspective on, how are agencies dealing with this, and how are employees feeling about it? Are they feeling threatened?
Yeah, well, I think at first employees feel threatened. I think you could even go back to the days of just client server when we moved people, off of mainframes onto PCs, and people thought they were going to be replaced and their jobs were going to be replaced. That's really not what's happening here. What's happening here is hopefully reskilling and a shift. If folks have a certain skill set, or they have domain expertise or knowledge about, a specific workload, you're just trying to upskill them so that they can now apply that within the new world. Maybe they have to learn new technology skills or a new process, but the topic in which they're working is still the same. I bet Adam could speak to this, as he's implementing brand new systems to support anything in HHS, he still needs those domain experts. They don't go away. He still needs to have the same caseworkers. He still needs to have the same folks that are manning the phones and speaking to the constituent. They just need to probably learn a new application or a new skill set. So I think the real move today is in upskilling or reskilling folks, not replacing folks. Even Ajay speaks to using, RPA or AI or something that sounds like, wait a minute, this is going to replace the need for a human. Not necessarily. There's such a volume and workload in this state that it's simply making things more efficient, but you still need the people, you still need the knowledge, you need them to teach those new new computers, new robots. They have to be taught by somebody, and they don't just self-learn all the time. They still need the domain expertise and the people to get those things up and running. So I think it's more of an upskilling and a shifting of the organization to support the new world.
Peter, I love that. And I really want to get views from everyone on this. So Ajay, let me start with you. How do you see, as Peter was talking about how this technology modernization is really changing both technology needs as well as customer agency needs. What has this meant for you? What has this move to technology modernization? How has it impacted your agency staffing and skills?
So good question. So I think the way we started I want to differentiate between transformation and modernization, right? So technology modernization part. I think Adam alluded to some of that as well, that we can live with legacy, right? Just because something is old and clunky, that's not necessarily the justification for modernization. Modernization is really about transforming the business and the technology overall, business for the most part. So when we or as we are taking this journey, right, I would call it this transition state. So we have come up with this really end state, right, where the customer, right, unlike HHS, right, health and human services is about high touch, right? The caseworkers, in fact, more technology can help, right? They could reduce the mechanical work the technicians might need to do before, or caseworkers might need to do before. They have to do less now, which means they can spend more time with the customers, thinking about their problems and solving their problems. And the same is true with the DMV as well, for the most part, except customer don't really, we created 6 personas for our customers. One of them was called High Touch Harry, right? Those are the only ones that like, we really want to go to field office. We want to talk about, our problems and just kind of spend the day there, right? But in general, most of the people want to stay away. So the DMV's problem is creating that front office, focus on the customer, providing the self-service, and just be done, right? So a little bit different of a problem there. The quality of the value to the customer is least amount of time spent on this particular admin task, right? So what we ended up doing, and from staffing standpoint, to getting to your question, was that there is quite a bit of shift in the way our back office works. There is quite a bit of shift the way our front office works as well. So there is definitely a need for digital upskilling, less for the people who are operating, because to tell you frankly, we are merely catching up with what user is doing, including our employees. With social media and other things, they're used to using mobile devices, they're used to using online services, banking and things like that. So we are catching up. So it's a little bit of an easier win there. But our IT staff, on the other hand, it's a pretty big shift in terms of digital upskilling. So by starting small, what we are doing is, we introduce a notion to the business and to the technology team. They understand, test it out, work out the kinks, and then we can go larger. And that's been the key for our success so far for our transformation and modernization work. You start small, you try it out, then you go big. Our entire modernization for DMV is split into 3 different phases. The first phase is in works right now, but it's the smallest building block. It's merely proving technology and the foundation related to it. Then we go big, and then we go complex, right? So that's really the goal that we are working on, and digital upskilling is following that particular path.
That's fantastic, Ajay. I think it's great that you're bringing everyone along as you're making these moves. Jay, let me turn to you and some of the things that you're thinking about. Clearly in your organization, how is it impacting your technology positions, and also how is it impacting, the individuals that you serve?
Yes. Everyone is mentioning about remote work, telework. It's kind of interesting. Cal fire, you cannot fight in fire virtually. You have to be physical. However, we still have the same journey of digital transformation, because we are moving into the digital world. We are moving into leverage technology to create a new, not just customer experience, new service capability. So what we did, it is bring technology in the hand of a firefighter by implementing the AI predicted fire behavior, fire pattern technology solution or data on the mobile app in the hand of a firefighter. So they can know ahead of time where the fire gonna go 20 minutes ahead of them or 1 hour, 2 hours ahead of them. Those kind of information normally require any fire captain 20 years on the ground experience to have. Now we equip every firefighter with that data, with that information, that substantially improve their situation awareness and improve our firefighting efforts. So we are more effective and we are more efficient. In addition, we have a large IoT footprint in the state. Besides all the cameras, satellite drone image, and we have all the vehicle with vehicle location. So we can tell by snapshot of where those firefighters are, where the fire engine are they in danger or not. So we do equip with them those technology. But for the IT side, definitely I agree with Peter, there is upscaling, rescaling required. firefighter, our customer is very young. I just want you to know. They are digital native. They come to CAL FIRE with Apple phone, say, here's what I have. Can you deliver this? So we are compete not just against Apple, against Google. We are compete with the digital world outside. So we require, us to really to pick up our skill. We are not trying to invent technology, but we try to adopt the technology innovatively, which will make it easier for a fighter to use. So there is transformation change internally and also externally. So, but we're excited about the progress we made.
Jay, that's fantastic. It's sort of that pulling function as well as getting your technology folks to be able to respond.
Yeah.
Well, Adam, let me go to you with that. You probably have this distributed workforce with your caseworkers and, so many people out in remote offices. As you're introducing new technologies, how's that going? Is that a bit of a challenge from a training and just getting people used to doing things differently?
Yeah, for sure. Surprisingly, the shift to remote was incredibly smooth. The technology teams, not just within my agency, across the state, really stepped up in ways I don't think anyone could have imagined to be needed, and how smoothly they were able to do that. I think it's really a shining point in a very difficult time for all of our folks to have been able to come up and provide those services. When we look at modernization, though, change management is a huge part of what we do for the folks that are out in the field. And it goes back to that user-centered design does not apply just to the public who are using these programs, but to the workers who provide them. And really sitting down to understand with them, how do you use this on a day-to-day basis? Historically, we hear stories all the time about rolling out new functionality and a caseworker sitting there and saying, yeah, it sounds great, but now I'm working in 3 different screens and I've got to go pull this from over here because when I do what you think I do, I'm actually over here doing these 2 other things. And I've got someone sitting here trying to talk to me while I'm trying to do it. And so really making sure that we recognize that user also applies to the staff who have to function within these environments has been a huge thing for us in building in that change management. And that additional challenge, as I mentioned in California, we have our partners with the counties who administer most of these programs. And so the state is an additional step removed from that actual provisioning of services, that actual interaction with individuals that just doubles up on the need to really sit down, have them at the table. And so a lot of times what you'll see us do is include funding within the projects we have for dedicated individuals to be a part of that project. The folks who on a day-to-day basis actually use these systems to sit there with us through design, right? See the development, advise on the actual usage and processes so that we're not just getting that at the end where we hand that over. And that's been a shift. We've all been a part of those conversations of trying to have more user-centered design. But the process of actually doing it, having the actual users step away from providing those services, which is what they're passionate about, right? It's what they love to do. And to say, hey, can you come over and be part of the IT project? And some people love that. And that's kind of jumping back to that conversation about upskilling. The other piece to that is cross-training, that at least at the state level, we do terrible at. We've got classifications that make it very difficult to move between program and IT or vice versa. And so getting those people who have the understanding of both sides has been a real challenge. And I think that's a big part of the modernization process that we need to work on too, is facilitating that more so that the people who get those opportunities and say, hey, this is fun. I like this, right? I didn't go to school to do IT because it never crossed my mind, but this is cool. Creating those opportunities for that mixing and matching, for people to move between the sides and be able to create that understanding from a very different mindset, I think is a key piece.
Great. Peter, do you want to weigh in here?
Yeah, I wanted to add on, I think what Adam's pointed out is very important, is that you can't do modernization in silos, meaning it doesn't help if you go and enable a constituent function that gives them some, great functionality on the web that's not integrated with your internal processes, I think is what Adam is getting at. Because what you end up doing is making it better for the citizen, but worse for your internal workforce. And if they have to suddenly use two systems where they used to use one, you're going to have all these internal issues. And I think that's where kind of the role, we're seeing some new roles out there. One of them is sort of like chief architect role, but it's not just from a technical standpoint. It's from that overall user experience standpoint, plus the technical. And making sure that when you start making these changes, you're thinking about the entire enterprise, not just, the face to the client, making that nice, slick, easy, and fun. But you have to account for your employees as well and how it's going to affect their jobs. I think Adam sounds like you've had some real experience in that space where maybe you made some mistakes, but you learned from them.
Exactly.
Yep.
Exactly. Well, Peter, let me carry on really with my next question and start with you. How do you see organizations deciding what to work on first? I mean, clearly Adam and Jay and Ajay come from huge organizations, completely dependent on the technology. So, clearly that user experience that you talked about, is important. But, with so many externally and internally facing systems, what are you seeing out there in terms of how organizations are dealing with that?
Yeah, see, prioritizing where to go it's all over the board, right? Because every department has its own priorities in who they serve and how they serve them. I think the revenue generating departments, they're really trying to implement new systems that support that revenue generation and that reduce paper. To be honest, a lot of those organizations have a lot of paper processes, and they're trying to enable those online so that people don't have to come into the buildings. They don't have to process paper. So I'm seeing a lot of workloads that are started with paper that are being reduced and are being considered as high priority. Second, there is the whole legislative mandates that are out there. So as we've moved to remote work, as we've had to support people differently, there have been laws passed and bills passed that are driving agencies and departments to do things in certain orders because they have to have new functionality available at a certain time or date by law. So sometimes that plays in. I think multi-language is one of those, and all the ADA requirements. Fraud is another area, right? As we moved online, we have seen an increase in fraud. And so there's a lot of agencies and departments that are simply trying to go after fraud and trying to reduce fraud. So they make that a high priority solution as well. And I would bet each of these folks have some area of cybersecurity or something that they're thinking about or keeps them up at night, simply because, and I think Adam said it, they're putting more data online and they're making it more transparent. So there's a lot more considerations for that as you're doing that.
Thanks, Peter. Well, Adam, I want to go back to a comment that you, that you kind of opened up with, and that is around this data sharing and data collaboration and the importance of that underlying any digital innovation. Are there things that sort of were highlighted as a result of response to the pandemic and, these needs that are out there? Or, is there a greater need for data sharing as you move toward your digital innovation?
Yes and yes. There's been a great deal of learning during the pandemic about our data. Luckily, Health and Human Services Agency in California had started down the path of really improving in our data maturity long before the pandemic that I helped position us well. We've had this recognition that our current secretary, Dr. Galley, is a huge priority of his, is using data to drive action and see the whole person. And this has not been, with that silo, particularly around data, how we operated, right? Data we use for a particular program, and you didn't move it outside of that. And that whole person care model is what really started to shift it. And the idea that started it all back before the pandemic was, how is it possible that when someone asks us the combination of programs that individuals use and the impact of that, we can't answer it, right? It was unfathomable to people who came into the agency to say that, how is that not possible? And that's what really positioned us well coming into the pandemic, is that we'd already started to put those ties in place. We'd already partnered with some nonprofits, with universities to look at doing data linkages, to start to look across our programs and see where these things were happening, to start to look at regions and identify programmatic uses. We can look at the uptake of the SNAP program across the state, and that does give us a global picture of how we're doing with enrollment, but it doesn't tell the same story as when you zoom down and you identify a demographic or a population in a region that would indicate to you a high uptake when you're seeing a low one. Then we can get together with our partners at the local level and really start to do some targeted work. And that's the same thing that we did with the pandemic, right? We started to look at regions. Where are we seeing these cases, right? What populations, what demographics, what regions, and how does that inform us about what's happening and what mitigation practices we need to have in place, right? And so you saw that in the response. Sometimes it was a statewide response because it's quick and it's fast moving. Sometimes things were focused regionally at a county level to recognize that there's differences happening there in different populations in different regions. And so really taking the ability to pull that data out and start to use it more collaboratively. And that's where that Center for Data Insights and Innovation really starts to come in. They're brand new, just created in the middle of the pandemic. So don't want to put too much weight on their shoulders, but having people whose day job isn't analyzing this sector of data and helping them lift up has really been a big factor in terms of that. So I'll pause there. Plenty of other thoughts, but don't want to.
Fantastic. Ajay, I was going to turn to you and, how has this impacted not only your data sharing internally, but also with other organizations, maybe even Adam?
So, yeah, actually, Terry, good question. Actually, I was going to talk about data sharing with Adam's agency, right, between transportation and health and human services, how they are collaborating already and will continue to collaborate. But I like Adam's thought around, the data-driven decisions, right, which is more internal facing, more intrinsic to the organizations, making what is that next step? What is the next thing we are going to do? At the DMV, we have put this culture in that any new ideas, any new proposals that come in within the divisions at DMV are really size of departments, right, in other parts of the other agencies. But those divisions are supposed to provide their return on investment and their total cost of ownership as part of the proposal. And all that comes with, the data and the insights that we will collect and then present and then come up with the justification to prioritize. So that's been becoming part of our culture. And I really love it. I really love seeing that in action now and being able to justify outside, because now when we take our proposal to finance and governor's office, we already have all this information available. And we know that we have done right by our constituents and how we want to spend the money taking these projects. But at the inter-department level or interagency level, in fact, Adam, you may or may not be aware of it already, that we are actually already collaborating with some of the health and human services agencies, and we intend to collaborate more. For example, as part of COVID and even a little bit before, we had started to look at, well, how do we automatically verify somebody's birth certificates, right? So working with the agency, coming up with an automated fashion to figure this out, it reduced per transaction over 30 to 45 seconds. It may not be big, but when you have millions of those transactions a month, it becomes very big from productivity standpoint. So that was one example where we use COVID as the crutch to get to that next step in terms of collaboration with Health and Human Services Agency. In fact, now we are looking at serving our customers, senior customers, partnering with transit agencies, giving them specific benefits, right? The senior status comes from the DMV because we have the age, right? The customers who are looking to provide, instead of showing their going to the office, showing their driver license, we can actually electronically share information as well with the specific transit agencies as well. And the same is true with customer behavior, right? GovOps as the big agency and California Data Center and the CIO's office as the entity that kind of controls and manages all the website traffic, right? understanding customer behavior, both from health and human services standpoint, from DMV standpoint, and other public sector services that we provide, we can give customers more personalized services without having any privacy related issues, right? Using some of the modern technologies. So that data sharing across these departments, including federated identity, is all becoming part of our roadmap that we are creating for Californians.
Oh, that's amazing, Ajay. Yeah, I want to come back to security, but Jay, I want you to weigh in here in terms of what's happening as it relates to data sharing, with CAL FIRE.
Well, CAL FIRE, we have the challenge of sharing data or receiving data for a wide array of federal and state government. Because when you see the fire, there is a 24 hours surveillance drone, there is unmanned aircraft, it's all kind of information. We absolutely not just wanted to share, they wanted to them to share with us electronically. That's what Ajay said. Data sharing is a magic word, but we are facing challenge, not just us, federal government is they will not be able to provide machine to machine electronic sharing. And that is a huge challenge because we are in the kind of AI machine learning environment. We need the data directly feed into our system, not just log on their website, download the data. That's how a lot of agents still doing. So we definitely wanted to promote machine-to-machine data sharing, electronic data sharing, take human out of the equation, so make that data faster to generate intelligence for our decision makers. So it is a challenge, but I think we are all on the same journey to move to that automated electronic sharing process.
Oh, that's great, Jay. So as you think about this sharing, how does security fit? And what are some of the things that you're thinking about as you're going into your digital transformation, introducing digital innovation, which are kind of interesting words, but there has to be security built in from the beginning.
Yes, actually, we believe, and also our practice, when you take a human out of the equation, it's much more secure, because when you build secure machine-to-machine interaction, you can monitor all the traffic pattern, monitor the access. You can secure the access between two agencies much better than have a human in there. So absolutely, it's easier to implement than you have a human to be in the between.
Yeah. Peter, let me ask you to weigh in here. What are you seeing that agencies are doing in terms of, with all of this going on, the innovation as well as the data sharing? What are some of the things they're thinking about from a security perspective?
The current trend is security by design, right? It's baking in security considerations up front instead of trying to harden the system after the fact. So what I'm seeing is the addition of cybersecurity folks on every team, on every project, making sure that we're considering standards and considering even innovation. Where is security going? What is coming down the road? Are those things that should be thought about or tested in our next release? So security by design, meaning let's design it in up front and not make it an afterthought, which was kind of in the past. I think folks would build solutions and they would put stuff out there, and then they'd bring in that security expert to come in and figure out how to secure it, which is too late today. Once you put the data out there, it's out there. And we all know that. And so you need to think about that up front. You need to make sure wherever you're putting your data, wherever you're storing it, that you're considering security from day one and that they're an active participant on the project.
Very good. Well, I want to take a few minutes to get some advice from each of you. I'd like you, what would be, I always like to leave the audience with a piece of advice and a direction from each of you as experts. So I'm actually going to start, Ajay, with you. What advice would you have for the audience as they're moving forward with their digital innovation?
So I would say seek partnerships, right? Whether it's public-private partnership or academia partnerships, look elsewhere in other industry. You want to recombine the innovations that have already happened in other industries. So do not limit yourself to public sector, right? Look somewhere else, combine those pieces together. What my innovation professor used to call recombinant innovations. I think that's where the place for it. Start small. I would say also work both top downs and bottom up to seek sponsorship. It's typical to seek sponsorship top down, but bottoms up is extremely important to manage that change. Find early adopters and find the real need for transformation. And that's what is going to carry you through. Those are the people and those are the entities that are going to be most flexible in adopting and being a little bit more tolerant to the change and some of the hiccups that you're going to face along the way as you're transformed. Those would be my advice.
Thank you, Ajay. Well, Jay, let me turn to you. What advice would you have as our audience moves to digital innovation?
Okay, I would just probably focus on data. When we talk about data innovation or digital innovation, we need to have a bigger perspective of what is the data lifecycle from data collection to data storage and also data use. If we continue collect redundant data or collect junk data, we'll not be able to go too far. So let's have a pause to have a bigger perspective before we implement any data-related technology.
Outstanding. Adam, I'm going to go to you next. What advice would you have?
Sure, one on topic, one off topic. So first, start with the why. As I said, figure out what it is you're trying to solve for and how you're going to measure against that. Make sure that going into it that you're not just going to finish on time and on budget. Those are great. But more importantly, did you fix what you were trying to fix? Is it simpler for the user? Is it simpler for the worker? Is it faster? Make sure you understand what your purpose is and how you're going to measure that in the end and make that your Northern Star. Make sure everyone on the project knows that's how they measure whether or not what they're doing is actually working. And my off topic thing, just because it's a priority for Health and Human Services Agency, is about equity. Everything each of us does needs to have that equity lens. And California's outgoing Surgeon General said it in a way that was really profound to me yesterday that she heard from someone else. If you aren't intentionally focusing on equity, you are unintentionally being unequitable, right? And most of us, we just don't think about it proactively as part of what we do. So I would just say, in your modernization efforts, stop and think about what is the equity piece of what you're doing, because I promise it's there, even if it wasn't the original purpose.
Thank you, Adam. And Peter, I'm going to give you the last word here. What advice would you have for the audience as they're moving forward?
Sorry about that. I'll say three things. I'd say think outside of the box. We've heard some great examples of all of this great new technology that's out there. And I don't think a lot of folks know all of those capabilities. And so you kind of have to think outside of the box and think about new ways of doing business. And that leads right into the second one, which is challenge the norms. So as you're modernizing and transforming, don't just apply technology or automate current processes. Challenge those processes, make sure that they still make sense in today's world. And finally, I'd say take a different view of how you do a project and focus on the outcomes. Kind of leads into what Adam said about the why, but focus on outcomes. Don't focus on technology. We've talked a lot about technology. We've talked about data. The technology is there to accomplish a lot of these goals. Really set a new vision and a new outcome that you want to achieve. And then there'll be a lot of smart people that can come in and help you get there.
Outstanding. Well, I can't believe that this hour has just flown by. So we're going to have to wrap up here. In closing, I want to thank Peter and Jay and Adam and Ajay for sharing your insights with our audience today. And I want to thank KPMG for making it possible to have this important webcast discussion. And thanks to all of you for spending time with us. We look forward to seeing you again soon at another government technology event. Have a great rest of your day.